Can you read this letter? It's very important, the words that changed the billionaire CEO forever. Imagine holding in your hands a letter that could change your entire life, a letter that speaks louder than money, louder than success, louder even than your own fears. This is the story of a billionaire CEO who thought he had everything, until one handwritten envelope reminded him what truly matters in this world. Stay with me until the end, because this story might just change the way you look at your own life. And before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Kindness Stories, because here you will find stories that touch the heart and remind us all of the power of kindness. Ethan Caldwell was a man the world envied. At 42 years old, his name was etched into the skyline of New York City. He was the founder and CEO of Caldwell Technologies, a company that had grown from a two-room startup into a global empire worth billions. His face appeared in magazines, his speeches were quoted, his opinions could shift markets. He owned luxury homes across continents, drove cars that few would ever touch, and vacationed in places most only saw in postcards. Yet with all of this, Ethan carried a loneliness that no one around him could see. His calendar was full, but his heart was empty. He had chased success with such fury that he had forgotten how to pause, how to feel, how to remember the boy he once was. One late evening, Ethan returned to his Manhattan penthouse after a grueling day of negotiations. His assistant had left a neat stack of documents and mail on the marble dining table. Usually, Ethan ignored anything that wasn't urgent or digital. He had staff for bills, lawyers for contracts, secretaries for messages. But tonight, among the crisp envelopes, one stood out. It was small, worn at the edges, and handwritten. Across the front, in shaky letters, were the words, "Ethan. Can you read this letter? It's very important." He froze, staring at it. Nobody addressed him like that anymore. To the world, he was Mr. Caldwell or Sir. Even his closest colleagues used his title, his aura of power creating an invisible wall. Slowly, with a strange heaviness pressing against his chest, Ethan opened the envelope. Inside was a piece of lined notebook paper, filled with handwriting that seemed fragile yet determined. The first line read, "Dear Ethan, I don't know if this will reach you. Maybe you're too busy to read it. But if you are reading these words, please, just give me a few minutes of your time. That's all I ask." Ethan's brow furrowed. Who could this be? He read on. "You may not remember me. Years ago, when your company was still small, I worked as a janitor in your first office building. Every night, I would clean the halls, and every night, would see you working long past midnight. I never spoke much, because I knew men like you had no time for men like me. But one night, you dropped your wallet. I picked it up, and I saw the picture inside, a boy, maybe 5 years old. I assumed it was your son. You thanked me politely, but I never told you what that picture meant to me." Ethan's hand trembled slightly. That photograph. It wasn't his son, because he never had children. It was his younger brother, Daniel. Daniel had died in a car accident when Ethan was just 17. That photo was the last picture ever taken of him, and Ethan had carried it for decades as a quiet wound that never healed. He swallowed hard and forced himself to keep reading. The letter continued, "That night, seeing you with that picture, I realized something. We are all carrying pain, even the ones who look powerful. I wanted to tell you that night, but I couldn't. You see, my own daughter was sick. Terminal. The doctors gave her months. I cleaned offices just to keep her in treatment. And one night, I wrote a letter to God, asking him for a miracle. A week later, your company started a charity program. My daughter was one of the first patients it helped. She lived another 2 years because of it. 2 more birthdays. 2 more Christmases. Those were the happiest years of my life. I never got to thank you. And then, she was gone. And after that, I left the job." Ethan's eyes blurred. He set the paper down, pressing his palms to the table. He remembered that program. His board had opposed it, calling it a waste of resources, but Ethan had insisted. At the time, he thought it was simply good PR, a small way to honor Daniel's memory. He had no idea that it had given a father 2 more years with his daughter. He picked the letter back up, unable to stop. The last lines were written shakily, the pen pressing too hard on the paper as if the writer had little strength left. Now, I'm writing this because I am dying too. Cancer. I don't want money. I don't want anything. I just want you to know, you made a difference in my life. You gave me time with my little girl. And I need you to remember this: wealth fades, titles fade, but kindness is the only thing we leave behind. So please, Ethan, don't forget to be kind. That's all. The letter was signed with weak initials, J.M. Jacob Miller. Ethan remembered him vaguely, a quiet man who had emptied trash bins and mopped floors. Ethan had never given him a second thought. Now, decades later, Jacob's words pierced him deeper than any business failure or public scandal ever could. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He paced the length of his penthouse, replaying the words in his head. Kindness is the only thing we leave behind. The truth of it burned inside him. He had wealth beyond imagination, but what would people remember of him? Contracts? Glass towers? Numbers on a screen? The next morning, Ethan cancelled every meeting on his calendar. His board was furious, his investors confused, but he didn't care. He ordered his staff to find Jacob Miller immediately. But when they did, the news crushed him. Jacob had passed away just days earlier in a small hospice center in Queens. Ethan insisted on going there himself. The hospice was modest, far from the sleek hospitals he funded. The nurse led him to a quiet room where Jacob had spent his last moments. On the bedside table was a framed photo of a smiling little girl with bright eyes. Jacob's daughter. Beside it lay another folded paper, addressed to Ethan. With trembling hands, Ethan picked it up. It read, "Ethan, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get to see you. That's okay. All I wanted was for you to know what your kindness did for me. Please, don't let success blind you. Use it to light the way for others. Because in the end, we are remembered not for the towers we build, but for the lives we touch. Goodbye, my friend." Ethan pressed the letter to his chest as tears finally spilled down his face. He had not cried since Daniel's funeral, but now the grief came freely, not just for Jacob, not just for the little girl, but for all the years he had wasted chasing shadows instead of light. He realized then that all his wealth was meaningless if it was not used for good. The following week, Ethan stood before cameras at a press conference. The world expected another product launch or a business announcement. Instead, he spoke from the heart. He pledged billions from his personal fortune to build hospitals, fund schools, and provide shelters for the homeless. More importantly, he vowed to give not just his money, but his time. He would show up, he would listen, he would care. The business press was stunned. Some called him foolish, others called him noble. But Ethan didn't care. For the first time in years, he felt free. He began visiting hospitals quietly, without cameras. He knelt beside children fighting cancer, held the hands of parents drowning in fear, and shared meals with the homeless. People were astonished to see the billionaire CEO sitting on the floor of a shelter, laughing with children, wiping tears with strangers. Slowly, the world began to see him differently. Not as a cold, untouchable mogul, but as a man with a heart. Years later, when people spoke of Ethan Caldwell, they didn't speak of the skyscrapers he built or the fortune he amassed. They spoke of the hospitals that saved thousands, the scholarships that lifted generations, the shelters that gave dignity to the forgotten. They spoke of the countless moments where his kindness changed lives. And in his office, on his desk, there was always one framed piece of paper. A faded letter that began with the words, "Can you read this letter?" It's very important. Sometimes, it takes just one voice, one letter, to change a life forever. Ethan thought he had everything, but it was kindness, not wealth, that gave him purpose. So let me ask you, what letter are you ignoring in your own life? What kindness could you show today? If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to Kindness Stories, where we share powerful stories that remind us what truly matters. Because in the end, kindness is the only thing we leave behind.